Now, as we can see here, it's the gravitational spin that gives the magnetic field. What is that, young man? Hey, is that a widely accessible science fiction novel that's won awards and is wildly popular? You put that away this instant. But sir, it's got an easy to follow narrative and likable characters. There'll be none of those things in this classroom, young man. We are here to talk about hard science fiction. You put that away, turn to page 154 of your textbook, and we're going to talk about how gravity wells affect time differentials. Fine. Oh. Interesting characters and narratives. Kids these days. Dragon's Egg by Robert L. Ford does at times feel like you're sitting through a lecture, but a lecture where the professor is so passionate about the topic that even if it's, you're minor and you don't really care that much about it, it's still interesting to hear someone talk about something they're so passionate and so knowledgeable about. This is a really interesting book to talk about here because it was suggested to me on my Greg Egan's Diaspora review, 𝕤𝕠𝕠𝕜𝕤, as another really interesting, really good hard science fiction book. And I can see why. It shares a lot of similarities with Diaspora. It also falls down in a number of ways that Diaspora didn't, but it also does some things better than Diaspora did. It's not as hard to read, it's not as mind-bending as Greg Egan's work, but it's also not as interesting, I think. It also doesn't have as solid a narrative, but let's just dive right into what the book's about. It serves almost as a thought experiment more than a traditional narrative. Dragon's Egg focuses on a neutron star that has been ejected from the system of its birth and is currently on a close pass-by of our solar system. And we follow a group of humans as they take this once-in-a-galactic lifetime opportunity to get a close flyby of a neutron star. So they load up on their research ship and they head out towards the neutron star to perform research on it while they can. While there, they discover that the neutron star has a hard outer layer, a crust that has developed. And on that crust, there are life forms. There is a species of aliens that has developed entirely on a neutron star. And really, that is the core to the book. The narrative about the humans serves mostly as a framing device for us to explore different semi-narratives about the ℙ𝕠𝕠𝕜𝕠, the species that exist on the neutron star, and follow their development from a barbarian tribal sort of society all the way up through the Renaissance, their political Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution and beyond. Several really interesting things take place in this book, and the setting makes the constraints on the society of the ℙ𝕠𝕠𝕜 particularly interesting. Namely, the high gravitational strength of the neutron star and the very powerful magnetic fields restrict the sort of activities and societies that can develop on the planet, as well as the high gravitational strength means that time passes subjectively much faster on the surface of the neutron star than it does in orbit for the humans. Many years can pass on the surface of the planet for the ℙ𝕠𝕠𝕜 in the time that it takes humans to come up with a thought and to broadcast that thought down to them. Let's jump right in with the things that I like though, and first off is all the science stuff. If you don't like the idea of the science stuff, you aren't going to enjoy this book. This book explores these ideas in a really fascinating way. It is clearly a book where the fun, science-y, physics-y, space sci-fi tech ideas come first, and then the narrative is built around them to support that. And all of this scientific information is presented really accessibly because it's presented to us via snippets of life of ℙ𝕠𝕠𝕜𝕠 on this planet star. We can see the actual physical effects of this. It's all too well to tell us about the strong magnetic fields that range from east to west and how interesting that is, but seeing its effect on the ℙ𝕠𝕠𝕜 in that they can very easily move east and west across their planet, but moving north and south where they have to cross against the magnetic fields, that's known as the hard directions because it's much more difficult to move in those directions. That makes it so much more physical, so much more stapled in my mind and understandable, and the book is fantastic at doing that. And in the same vein, the communications between the humans and the ℙ𝕠𝕠𝕜 when that finally happens are fascinating because a ℙ𝕠𝕠𝕜 could live its entire lifetime in the time it takes humans to go through 40 minutes. So you have to deal with beings that communicate and live much, much faster than we do. So in the time it takes us to tell them a sentence, that can be years of work for one ℙ𝕠𝕠𝕜 to record these transmissions and write them down and turn them into their very individual, very specific language that is fascinating in of itself. And the way that it's portrayed just makes it super interesting. And following the ℙ𝕠𝕠𝕜 as their society develops, seeing it go from this sort of tribal society all the way through to sort of modern and postmodern technologies are fascinating. And seeing them do it under the constraints that are put upon them by the neutron star, by the gravity, by the magnetic field, by the spin, by the time dilation. All of that is really, really well done and really interesting. And it's a really cool first contact story. It's a really great story about humankind influencing the development of another species, but done so on a timescale where, you know, days might pass for humankind to see the entire existence of this species. And it's just a really interesting look into that. And really, that's kind of all that I like about the book. It's kind of all the book has to offer. I would say don't come to this book looking for a traditional sci-fi narrative. It's not really here. The story that is here is perfectly serviceable to do what the book is trying to do. But, you know, the characters that exist, especially on the human side, there's nothing interesting there. The characters aren't interesting. They don't do interesting things or have interesting problems. We really exist purely as a way to explore the ℕ𝕤 society. And the narratives of the ℕ𝕤 society do connect in some ways, but like, because of the timescale thing, like, subjectively hundreds or thousands of years pass in the ℕ𝕤 society during this time, so there are big time jumps. And we're following different characters as the society develops. So it's more of a book about ideas and about exploring those ideas than it is about telling a concrete story. And it's not really a negative to the book, but it's also not really a positive. I don't really have a lot to complain about. I think the book does what it sets out to do pretty perfectly. I think the science is fun, I think the science is well explored, accessible, which is important, and the science is probably a bit outdated and fanciful. I'm pretty sure we don't have 4 black holes orbiting around in our sun. Last I counted, there were none, but it's been a while since I counted. But that's kind of just a plot point, not really a scientific claim that the book is making. I enjoyed my time with Dragon's Egg, I really did. And while writing this review, I discovered that there's a sequel. So question of the day, has anyone read Starquake by Robert L. Forward? I read the blurb and it worries me a little bit, because as much as I would love to read more about the ℕ𝕤, this blurb kind of suggests that it retcons the entire ending of the book, which is one of my favourite concepts in the entire book. For anyone that's read it, when this isn't spoilers until you get to it, I'm talking about the sort of encrypted message thing at the end. I love that idea. I think that was fantastically done, fantastically written, and really well revealed. But it seems like Starquake kind of pretends that never happened. It kind of takes a step back in time before that point and tells its story there, so I don't know how that's going to work. If you've read it, let me know. But as for an overall rating, look, I enjoyed the book. It's not the sort of hard science fiction tour de force that Greg Egan's work is. It's easier to read than Egan by a metric mile, but it doesn't really have a strong enough narrative to be something that sticks in my mind long term. It doesn't have that narrative that will make it subjectively interesting to my mind to hold on to and chew for a very long time. But if you're like me and you like watching space videos on YouTube, you like watching space documentaries, you like watching physics videos, this is the sort of book that's going to be a really interesting read, and you're going to get through it really quickly. And the ending actually has an appendix which is written in universe, which is really nice as well. And overall, I think I'm going to give this book a 6 out of 10. It's good, but not great. It's missing a bit of the narrative, but what is here is really, really well done. And I think if it sounds like a book you'd enjoy, you should check it out, because you probably will. And shockingly, I couldn't believe this until I was sitting down to write the review, this is actually a bingo book for me. Bring up my bingo board. If you don't know, on Reddit, rFantasy does a bingo competition every year. It ends in March and starts in April. These are the prompts. You have to read a book that matches each prompt. There are also hard modes available, and I'm aiming to do the hard mode of each book and read and review them before the end of the competition. This one, Dragon's Egg, matches, I think, my favorite thing to do with these books, which is to read a book for rFantasy's bingo that is very much not fantasy and not what was in mind when the prompt was read. Technically correct is by far the best correct, I think we can agree. Dragon's Egg matches the entitled animals square. The hard mode for entitled animals is that it has to be a mystical animal, and the actual prompt is that there has to be an animal in the title, and most importantly, the prompt says the animal does not have to appear in the book. So a dragon is a mystical animal, so Dragon's Egg is an entitled animal book, so put it in the square and lock it in. I love putting the sci-fi books in the fantasy squares. If you want to buy a copy of Dragon's Egg for yourself, then there will be a link in the description below. It helps support the channel. And speaking of supporting the channel, I really want to thank the first ever channel member. Welcome to my book club, person who joined the channel and then 30 seconds later deleted their entire Google account. That's a good review, right? It was so good joining my channel that they couldn't interact with it anymore. They couldn't interact with the internet anymore. They had to delete their entire account. They'd peaked and they knew it was all downhill from there. If you want to help support the channel, then please do check out my links in the description. Please check out my wish list and check out my channel membership if you're interested. Let me know in your comments what you thought about Dragon's Egg. Say thank you to my mysterious member. But most of all, just remember to keep reading.